if they're getting a ton of money to do what they're doing to these animals, I think people should know what's going on. And the reality is that Madison and most places doing animal research have never been very open about that. So I am going to talk a little bit about why I got involved in animal research, because that is one of the main questions I am asked. And it actually was because I love animals. And so this is kind of a point that I will kind of repeat, I guess, so to speak, because the reality is that it's not unusual for people to get involved in animal research because they love animals or like animals. I don't think that a lot of people realize what they're getting themselves into, kind of like me. So in my case, I had started out at the university and I was still kind of deciding what I was going to be majoring in. I really loved Jane Goodall, as you can probably guess from this image here. I looked up to her. I was fascinated with the primates. I thought it would be amazing to work in primate conservation. It was kind of felt like a fantasy, though. My sophomore year of college, I took a course all about the primates. So it was like, for those of you who are at University of Wisconsin-Madison, I'm pretty sure they still offer this course. And it's basically animal behavior, the primates. And it was just a deep dive into the world of primates. It was taught at the time by the director of Harlow Primate Lab, where I ended up working, which is sort of interesting. But I was initially afraid to kind of get into that line of work, mostly because I didn't think that I was smart enough to do chemistry and physics and all the things that were required of like studying zoology or one of the sciences. But this class kind of pushed me over the edge because I was so excited about kind of this idea of following in Jane Goodall's steps. And I figured, why can't I sort of do that? Why can't that be me? And so I eventually decided the following fall, my sophomore year, to apply for a job at the Primate Lab as a caretaker so that I could get some experience taking care of monkeys. To my knowledge, and maybe if there's some of you who have taken this class more recently, you might know more, but I don't remember a whole lot being talked about in terms of animal research, or at least what it might have been sort of covering was probably more gentle than, so I wasn't thinking too deeply about it because I definitely did not know what I was signing up for, to say the least. But I figured it was a good opportunity, and so I went for it. And so I just have this quick timeline here just to kind of show you how old I am. No, I'm just kidding. I was at, sorry, my cats. I was at the university from 2011, or sorry, at the lab specifically from 2011 to 2013. And then following, it wasn't until much, much later that sort of I started to kind of really come to terms with what that whole experience did to me. I'll talk a little bit about this later, but I was diagnosed with PTSD as a result of the lab, much later than I actually had it, but I was kind of avoiding it. Today, I am, I would consider myself an animal and just general justice activist. Wow, I'm having trouble talking. I've been working in the field of animal protection now for over a decade, so this definitely kind of got me there, but I just kind of want to show you sort of where things, what things led to overall. Yes, I agree, Serenity. Someone put in the chat, animals are not voiceless, and that it's important for us to remember this. Yes, they are not. And especially, I can say, for all of them, but especially these primates in the lab, their animals are expressing themselves all of the time. They are fighting for themselves, whether or not we want to kind of come to terms with that, but that is what is going on, absolutely. So I am going to tell a few kind of short stories, anecdotes to kind of give you an idea of what I saw and what I was a part of. And then I'm going to go a little bit more into sort of what the industry is saying, my perspective, as well as how it led to lawsuits, including a lawsuit against the university that is currently ongoing. And then I will eventually wrap up by telling you about Justify, which is an organization I co-founded that has to do with all of this and helping other former and current lab workers sort of come to terms with all of this and speak up. So, and feel free to put questions in the chat as I go if there's anything burning. Of course, I will also answer questions afterwards. And for those of you watching as a group, if you just want to jot down questions, and hopefully we can get to them all. Oh my goodness. So cats are jumping everywhere. It's like they know that you're on a Zoom or like a presentation. All right, so, and I can't see anyone's faces, so I mostly feel like I'm talking to myself, but it's great to be here. So, all right. So I want to start with Patrick. Actually, the timing is on point because Patrick was the first rejected newborn macaque that I cared for in kind of on my own in the lab. On my own being like so hold on, let me back up for a second. The summary of a student animal caretaker, just for all of you to kind of understand, is that I worked about 12-ish hours per week over the course of 2 years. And a good chunk of that was every other weekend. So on the weekends, 2 of us student caretakers were in charge of health checks, feeding, hosing down, cleaning, anything related to the monkeys on the weekends. So 2 of us for over 500 monkeys. You can imagine how overwhelming that is. So the weekends were also kind of when, or at least when, like, the weekends are where I have like my strongest memories, because that, it was just the 2 of us. And so that's just when things would happen. So Patrick, on the weekends, one of the things that we would have to do is care for any rejected newborns, which was actually not oh my goodness, sorry, an unusual thing in the lab. The reality is that this is a breeding facility. Monkeys are basically, female macaques are being placed with males, and they're trying to get them to breed. Oftentimes this leads to injuries because the females may not like the male may not like that female. So there's a lot of dynamics going on there. I mean, there were times that we would know that there was kind of like a new pairing and to be listening for screaming. So that's really upsetting. And then the reality is that some of these monkeys, if it was their first time having a baby, they might not really know what to do, because most of these monkeys are living with just one other individual or even alone. They're not living in like group settings like they would in the wild, where they would learn from each other, and kind of there would be more aunting practices of caring for babies. So all that being said, sometimes we would find infants rejected by their mothers, which would mean that they would be like at the bottom of the cage. And if we found them in time, then we could care for them. And when I say in time, I mean, sometimes they would die if they were, if too much time went past and they were not found. So this monkey that I first cared for, it was kind of this like surreal experience, because I mean, this image, I worked with an artist kind of to help bring my memory to life of this moment, because the way that the infants, they hold on to you, this is literally the size they are. and they wrap their two like arms around your hand and then their legs around your wrist. And then they just kind of look at you and you syringe feed them. And, you know, there's just this like all of these feelings, because it's like, especially as an animal lover, it's like, oh my God, like this being is so perfect and beautiful and adorable. And then it's like, and what are they doing here? Like what's going to happen to them? And so it was kind of one of those challenging, formidable moments, I would say. I gave him the name Patrick because it was St. Patrick's Day. So not super creative, but I just kind of wanted to give him a name, because in the labs, the animals are really not named. They're given numbers and letters. So in the lab that I worked in, it was like 2 letters and 2 numbers. So like AX43. And so it made it really hard, especially with over 500 animals, to know who individuals were. And I think that's, you know, that's one of those things that's sort of on purpose, you know, because the more distant you can be from these animals, the easier it is to allow, you know, whatever it is to happen to them. So that's Patrick. And with all of these animals, truthfully, I don't know what happened to them, because I did not ever allow myself to track who they were, with like my names that I gave them, with their names or with their like letters and numbers, because I think that was sort of a subconscious protection. I'll talk a little bit about this in a bit, but there was a lot of dissociating going on that I didn't even really know I was doing at the time, because I was very young and I didn't know a lot about mental health. And now looking back on it, I see how all of this impacted me. So this is Cheerio. Cheerio was a pretty sad case for me. And this, again, I worked with another artist to kind of bring this to life for me. And also because I think it is important to not show a bunch of really graphic images that, you know, I think sometimes this kind of thing helps to really bring a story to life in a unique way. So what was going on with Cheerio, and again, this was just the name I gave him. He was, I would say, around a 1-year-old macaque, and he was having health issues. It was unclear, or like we never figured out what was actually going on. But basically, he just like wasn't able to use his limbs anymore to move around. So he would lay kind of like this at the bottom of his cage and just like not be able to really get around, and he couldn't even use his hands to feed himself. And the vets couldn't figure out what was going on. We had him in like a special part of the lab where we were able to like monitor animals who were sick more closely. And, you know, one of the things with him is that like, even though he was struggling so much, he was still like so full of life. And, you know, you would just like place food in his mouth and he was like so happy for it. And again, these are wild, dangerous animals. I would never do this like in a normal situation, but this individual needed help. He knew he needed help. And so he wasn't aggressive with us. Ultimately, they decided on a weekend that I was working, which happened to be New Year's, that they were going to euthanize him because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And the reality was, as a disabled monkey, he wasn't going to be useful to them. And yeah, they weren't going to invest in him. So my coworker and I were asked to assist with that, assist the veterinarian, because once again, it was the weekend. And so there were just 2 of us students taking care of all these animals. So a veterinarian came in and, you know, I just remember we like carried him to this other tiny room. There was like this sterile table and we had him laid down on his back, and the veterinarian asked me to like hold down his arm and asked my coworker to hold his other leg and arm, and then he was going to inject his leg. And, you know, I just remember like holding his hand, like I wasn't even holding him down, because the reality was he couldn't really move. And he just, you know, it was just one of those things where I watched, I looked him in the eyes and watched as, you know, these bright, full of life eyes just went dark. And it was heartbreaking. And I remember crying in all of my garb, my PPE. So for those of you who aren't familiar with animal research and what people are wearing, you're usually kind of like dressed in all of this like scrubs, but also then like hairnet, a face shield, a mask. So it's really hard to kind of see, gloves, all of that. I don't even know if the vet or my coworker knew that I was crying. It wasn't really an environment where we were encouraged to, you know, care too much. Like as caretakers, we were supposed to care. But again, you're walking this fine line in animal research where the animals are there, but they're there for animal research. And if you care too much, that can threaten the research. So yeah, that was Cheerio. I'm going to tell one more, and then we will kind of move along to the sort of, I think, what'll feel less intense. I don't know. I can't see anyone's faces. It'll feel less intense for me. So the other story that is ingrained in my brain, I mean, there's some others, but this one, I think, it was a real turning point for me. So again, this was a weekend. What happened is that Saturday when I got to work, I discovered that one of the monkeys in the group setting. So there was one room in this lab where the macaques actually lived in small groups. Now, instead of these like tiny cages, which you'll see an image of in a little bit, it's like a giant cage. So it wasn't anything, I would say, like so much better, other than you might be with like 5-6 other monkeys. And there are about 5 or 6 groups of these. So again, most of the monkeys were living either with one other individual as adults or alone. But this was kind of a unique case. So one of the monkeys in there, she, I noticed that she was carrying around her baby, but her baby was lifeless. So her baby had died. We don't know what happened between when she gave birth and the baby dying. If the baby was dead when she gave birth, unclear. But she was still carrying her infant around. And so I had, reported this to my boss, and she had said if she's still carrying the baby around tomorrow, as in Sunday, then me and my coworker needed to take the baby from her. Because it's not healthy for her to just carry her dead infant around. We don't know what's wrong with them. But obviously, this is her mourning, which I think even at the time I wasn't fully grasping. So Sunday comes along and she is still carrying her infant around. And so what ended up happening is me and my coworker had to figure out how to get this baby from her, but she's in this group with like 5 other, female monkeys, and then one big like male monkey who was like the sort of alpha of the group. And so what we ended up doing, which to this day, I kind of am like, this does not seem at all like a good idea or safe. But we basically, the way this works is we were able to sort of get her to go into this section of the cage, where then she would go into a carrier. And the way we got her to do that is by me going into the cage with all of the monkeys. And then my coworker standing with the carrier like over to the side, and it kind of like got her sort of worked up enough to go into it. But I'm like standing in there with these rhesus monkeys who, you know, for all intents and purposes, could be carrying, you know, or shedding very dangerous diseases, not to mention their teeth look like this, what you're seeing on the screen. And I have been bit by one before, and I would not have a finger if I didn't have the glove on that I did, but that's another story. So we take this monkey over to something called a squeeze, a tabletop restraint, which is something I actually have a picture of in a little bit, so I'll make sure to point you back to it. But basically what it is it's something that you bring the cage with the monkey up to it, and then the monkey can go out of that and into this squeeze, which is, it kind of looks like this with teeth, like where you can tighten it so that then you could like secure a monkey from being able to move too much and give them an injection. In this case, we weren't trying to like get her super secure. We were just trying to get her where we could take the baby from her. And so we were trying to do this in a way where it wasn't just like grabbing the baby. And so I took some like high value treats, which would be marshmallows. These monkeys love marshmallows. I wouldn't say that they're a very healthy thing for them to be eating, but that was the reality. So I was putting down into like the squeeze area some marshmallow, and the mother carrying her infant would come out, take the marshmallow, and then go back into like the carrying cage. And this happened a couple times. And we're like, okay, like, you know, we need to get this baby. I think it was probably like the third or fourth time that I put down the marshmallow, another one, and she came out, she put her baby down, she put her lips on the baby's head, like literally mouth to baby's head, left the baby, and went back in the carrying cage without the marshmallow. And that, I mean, I hope that that it's clear what was going on there, because it was completely apparent to me that she knew. She knew what we were trying to do. She knew that we had come for her baby. She knew she had to, you know, that was what was going to happen. And just seeing what almost seemed like a kiss, and obviously, you know, like, yes, there's all this like kind of anthropomorphizing or whatever, but you know, it was there. The caring for her child was there. And I always think of this story when I think about, you know, the news that broke when that orca, the killer whale, that was carrying around her dead infant. This is what I think about. You know, like it still kind of surprises me that people are still surprised that these animals care so deeply for their own, you know, babies, their family, their friends. So my coworker brought her back to her cage, and I had to take her infant and put him in a biohazard plastic bag and in the freezer. And that was the story of this mother in particular. So I alluded a little bit to kind of my mental health and the fact that I was eventually diagnosed with PTSD. You know, I just want to address the fact that, you know, some people, especially people who knew me in college, will say like, I had no idea that you were struggling with this. And that's because the reality is I was living two different lives, at least. And again, I think it was more of a subconscious thing, but there was like the person working in the lab, and which, you know, was like this windowless building. It felt like a whole other world than the person who was, you know, a student and, you know, doing AmeriCorps work and had double majoring and going out with friends and going to football games. You know, there were just these two different lives, and I did a good job of like dissociating. And once I walked out of the lab, sort of just being like, trying to not think about it until I was there again. So when I finally was done working in the lab, and I didn't actually, like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm done, I'm leaving. It was, I'm graduating. And so my time is done here. I was given, which I guess is a normal gift, the framed photo that you're seeing on the right, the framed collage, which says, "Thanks, Maddie, from all of your friends at HPL." These are monkeys that were at Harlow Primate Lab. I don't know who they are. I don't know if they were alive when I was there, if they're monkeys that had already died. I don't know if they're still alive. I mean, there's something pretty haunting about, I think, this. That's, you know, I don't know. There's a lot to work through there. But I like to kind of include this quote by Dr. John Gluck. If you don't know who he is, he was a primate scientist. He worked under Harry Harlow. And he wrote an amazing book that is honestly one of the main reasons that I started talking. So he basically did an amazing job of detailing his experience working in primate research and how he started to move away from defending it and wanting to be a part of it. This quote says, "I don't think I ever escaped the monkeys' faces. I want to be reminded about how inconsiderate I could become as a human being, so devoted to my own success and losing touch with the rest of the world around me." And honestly, it was like his whole book, it just felt like, yes, like I like, you see me, I see you. Like there was this connection there that had been missing, because a lot of people, including myself, leave animal research labs, and whether or not, you know, they're sort of feeling some way about it, they may never speak to someone about it again, because this is a powerful industry. It's very intimidating. A lot of people back it without even really knowing what they're backing. And yes, thank you, Mom. He wrote Voracious Science and Vulnerable Animals. So that's the book that I highly recommend. So I included a quote, actually. I've been asked in the past if coworkers of mine had similar feelings to me, or if we ever talked about it. And the answer is no, we never talked about it. So I had no idea if anyone felt the same way, because again, this was not an environment where people were like, yeah, let's really create a safe space to talk about how we might be concerned about the way animals are being treated. That wasn't really what they were trying to do. And you knew that. You knew how, even if it wasn't talked about that much, you knew how they felt about like animal activists, for example. So it was once I kind of started talking, specifically like Instagram is where I started kind of sharing my stories and dipping my toes in the water, so to speak, that eventually I heard from a coworker who I did overlap with, who told me that she had also struggled. And this is a quote by her. So she said, "Labs don't want you to know what I know, saw, felt, and still feel. They do not want to address the pain and suffering they cause. They're afraid to acknowledge that they've built a system that allows them to do horrible things to animals without repercussions. They cause unimaginable suffering because there are no suitable laws or regulations in place to protect those whose voices are deliberately suppressed. You deserve to know the truth." And as I've kind of alluded to, there is a huge pattern taking place. And I think gradually more people are talking about it. This quote says, many research technicians go into the field of animal research to help animals, yet their day-to-day work ends up being the killing of animals or being complicit in creating pain, distress, disease, and other noxious states demanded by the research enterprise. And you can imagine that for people who really care about animals, that it's like it either really kind of breaks you down or it hardens you, or you have to kind of emotionally shut off. And that's a lot of what I did is I was still struggling, but I did a really good job of sort of just suppressing for a very long time, for actually years. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit because I do want to kind of get into sort of, I don't know, some perspective from UW and just the industry in general in terms of like how the industry talks about animal research and animal activists. So this is several, like a few years old now, but this was kind of just like this was from when PETA had gone undercover in one of the labs, which I did not know about until all of this happened. But basically, they were trying to say that, these videos that PETA had put out is not showing how humanely the monkeys are being treated, the great care, how science is being advanced, all of that. And so I just want to kind of contrast that a little bit with, again, my experience and what I know. And it's not to say that, what I know is everything, but I think it's important to be uplifting the voices of those who have been in the labs and have come out with different opinions. So I mentioned the tabletop restraint or the squeeze before. So this is what the mother monkey was sort of like, her carrying cage was set up like against this. And this is where I was just like sticking a marshmallow so that she would just kind of crawl into it. But the squeeze itself, like this is a standard device used where like you can literally just like secure the animal so that then you can give them a shot. And some of the cages, actually, the individual cages were squeezes, so to speak, where you could pull them forward. So like imagine being in your own like space, right? You're in this tiny cage, but it's like your home and you're being pulled forward to get an injection. Again, at the time I was just taught like, this is normal. This is what you do. But when I actually think deeply about this practice and how just like, the power dynamics and how scared these animals were of just, being, forced to do whatever it was. These are things that I think we need to talk about because they are living in stressful environments. What they're experiencing is inherently stressful. And you just can't say that that's not impacting whatever, the science is. On the right is there is a study currently taking place where they are once again trying, and this is at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, they are studying extreme anxiety in females. And to do that, they are inducing extreme anxiety in monkeys. And this is a quote from the research kind of proposal that says a live snake is used because they elicit the most reliable and robust fear response. There's a lot I could say about this, and I will kind of talk a little bit more about it later. A lot of my stuff kind of bounces around a bit, but my main point here is that these animals are already stressed. And now for this research study, because we're studying anxiety, we're eliciting more fear in them when, there's so many of us, including myself, who struggle with, day-to-day anxiety to crippling anxiety. And one of the things that like we just don't have access to or can't afford is medications and therapy and things like that that already exist. And yet this is what's still going on. So these are things that I think it's really important for us to think about. This came directly from the university's website. It looks like, actually noticed that it seems like they kind of updated their animal research area to try to sort of talk about the things that people bring up, especially animal activists. So I just thought I would screen grab some of it. And the background is like these cages that you're seeing, like this is what it looks like. Like this is what the singly housed monkeys, their space and what it like, they might have like a plastic ball in there or something, but the sizing and stuff, this is it. So what it says is that the wide range of students, faculty, and scientists at Madison who use animals in research believe that the use of animals in research is ethical when performed under strict regulation in situations where practical alternatives do not exist. The ethical decision amounts to a trade-off between the harm that may be done to the animals, the benefiting of suffering patients today and in the future. The vast majority of biomedical scientists believe that the abolition of animal research is an unrealistic position. While we respect the viewpoint of those who oppose research on animals, we feel that the potential benefits to human welfare, animal welfare, and basic knowledge about life are too important to not do research. An argument can be made that refraining from the research would actually be unethical. Now, in this moment, I'm not actually going to speak to much of that. I just kind of want to put it out there for you to think about and to sort of just understand what it is that they're putting out. It is becoming actually a little bit more mainstream for people to start talking about how people feel in labs, which was kind of wild to me. But this is a relatively recent article from science.org where they talked about what it's like, the mental toll for people like me who were caring for animals in labs. But what was really interesting about the article is that everyone they spoke to were people that were not actually, did not change their opinion about animal research. So they only talked to people who said, yeah, but we still must use them for like biomedical research, which to me is very biased. And it just, there's plenty of us like me who would have offered a different perspective. So you can see that the industry still definitely has a lot of support. And in a way, they're like trying to say, yeah, we do care about the fact that people are struggling with this and we'll try to make it better for them. But ultimately, we still have to do this. It's a necessary evil. So, okay. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into this, but I can definitely answer questions about it if people have it. As I started kind of sharing stories like you've heard from me today, I had started tagging Madison, UW-Madison, like my Instagram account, and commenting on some of their posts about, what was going on in their labs because, they get a ton of money from the government. They're, government funded. And so those are tax dollars. And, if they're getting a ton of money to do what they're doing to these animals, I think people should know what's going on. And the reality is that Madison and most places doing animal research have never been very open about that. And it's hard to really know what is going on. So anyway, this led to a lawsuit where I am currently represented by the Animal Legal Defense Fund. For those who aren't familiar with them, they are like an animal law group. And then there are some lawyers based in Wisconsin who work with them. This is currently, so kind of where this is at right now at this point is that it's a free speech lawsuit, so to speak. They did rule against me, which, is not super surprising to say, because I just think this industry is really, powerful, unfortunately. But we are currently, what is the word I'm looking for? Here we go. Oh my goodness. This is, yeah. We are appealing. There it is, appeal. Okay, so currently this is in the appeal phase. So there's not a whole lot to say about it, but I do want to make the point that one of the things, if you don't know this, a lot of universities are doing this. It's not just University of Wisconsin-Madison. OHSU is doing it, where they had certain words that were under a blocked word list. And so if anyone, not just me, but like anyone was to comment on their Instagram and use a word that was on that list, or like, so if they had said, stop torturing monkeys, your comment would not exist to the public. Okay. So their blocked word lists were all made up entirely, almost entirely, of words related to animal testing. So it was very clear that they were trying to stop this conversation. Now, the blocked word list, they now, I think, have maybe gotten rid of, but it's unclear. And I think that can change at any time. But check it out with other universities. You can do FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, and find this out. I'm going to keep moving along. But basically, lawsuit number 2 is with me, a friend of mine, Ryan, and PETA against the NIH. And it's actually very similar because we discovered that the NIH is using blocked word lists too. So the NIH, which is funding, I believe it's like $21 billion worth of animal research every year, has blocked word lists that are made up almost entirely of words related to animal research. So like when you think about that, it's like we're supposed to be able to have a say in this, and this has to do with our tax dollars, and you can't even comment on that. You can see that like clearly there's something wrong. Clearly there's a lot of pushback that they're trying to not have to deal with. And how is that actually ethical? So those are the 2 lawsuits. I want to sort of wrap up here by just kind of mentioning a few sort of conclusions that I have come to on my own, and also just through talking with other activists, other people who worked in the industry. One of which is that I think something that we need to consider. I know that like science, there's supposed to be like this, like we're kind of obsessed with being objective, right? But the reality is that scientific objectivity cannot exist in animal research because the scientist has already deemed consent necessary for humans, but unnecessary for animal subjects. And that's a bias that's going to taint every part of the research, from methods to findings. And there's really nothing objective about deciding that one being is less deserving of respect and bodily autonomy than another. This comes straight from Madison's website. UW-Madison spends almost $25 million each year on food, bedding, housing, and salaries to support the care and well-being of its research animals. $25 million. Now, I know that's like meant to say, like, look at how much we're doing, but my brain goes, wow, what could that $25 million be used for that would immediately help and change the lives of humans that need access to resources like healthcare, health insurance, therapy, clean water, food, shelter. So when we think about the fact that a lot of people go into this industry to help humans, I want us to think about how much money keeps going into this industry and what is actually coming out of it. And meanwhile, all of the people who, and I'm guessing that a lot of you, like me, know others, or maybe even yourself, who are still like unable to access things that would drastically improve their lives, change their lives. These things that already exist, but meanwhile, money is being funneled into this industry. So this was like a little exercise I did a while back for a presentation. I kept it here just to show you that, like, you know, for this one study where they were getting $3.5 million, what would that $3.5 million do for, you know, people needing insurance for a year? And I had found out that, like, you know, on average, it would cost this much, whatever. Basically coming down to $3.5 million could, not insurance, therapy, get 670 people weekly therapy for a year, you know? And therapy is something that I hear time and time again. People are like, I should be in it, but I can't afford it. We don't need research for that. We just need people to have access to what exists. So something that this kind of wraps that up with, we can solve our problems, but it's not clear that we can solve our problems and get rich at the same time. And that is the current requirement for all solutions. So I think, you know, again, why are we doing what we are doing? And are there better, faster, you know, less harmful ways that we can help humans and also not harm animals? And we have to get this idea out of our heads that being against animal research means you're anti-science or anti-human, because that is not true. It is absolutely not true. And it is so frustrating to see so much money funneled into this industry when people just, you know, cannot get a medication that they need, that, again, exists. I know I am like running low on time. That's the word I'm looking for. One thing I just want to say is look up, check out Bainbridge, what's going on in Bainbridge if you do not know already. Bainbridge, Georgia, they're trying to open a breeding facility for monkeys. And some of the most inspiring stuff I've ever seen is taking place there, where the local community is working alongside animal activists to try to prevent this from happening. And it's seriously like they're showing up at like town hall meetings. They are out there protesting. These are just like, it's the entire community, and it's community led, and it's beautiful, and it's something to learn from. So for those of you who are interested in that, definitely check that out. In order to get to your questions, I'm going to kind of breeze through and just kind of wrap up by letting you all know that all of this basically led to the formation of Justify, this group that I co-founded with two other amazing people, Mallory and Lindsay, who have both worked in labs before, and are now you know, speaking out in a similar way that I am. This is a very like kind of new, and we're doing this volunteer. This is not like a nonprofit or anything. Like, it's literally just kind of a side thing. But from, you know, telling these stories online, I was starting to get messages from people all over the country about working in labs and what their experiences were. And we kind of realized that it's like, what has helped us was finding each other and being able to talk to each other about this. And so that is how we kind of came up with this idea to start Justify, with the idea being like, what, you know, when we justify these things, what takes place? So we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. This is like the contact information. I'll leave up for just a second. And then I had just a few takeaways that I wanted to go over, or just kind of like that I was hoping you take away. Whether or not you take it away, that's up to you. But some things to keep in mind: consider and learn from the perspectives of animal lab workers, and refrain from judgment and using hostile language towards them. You know, I know it can be really hard, especially when you hear certain things or certain stories, to not just be like, like that is so awful, or this is so horrendous. I get really upset too. I mean, I've been there firsthand, so it's like, it's even triggering to me. But at the same time, you can be kind to someone and empathize with them without supporting what they're doing or did. Because if they're going to, you know, kind of start thinking more critically about or differently, I should say, about the use of animals, they're going to do that if they feel safe to do that. And that's, again, where justify comes in as well. Another thing that I didn't really get to talk a lot about, but regulations and oversight of animal research, they look a lot more impressive than they actually are. Yeah, that's kind of a whole other thing. But another point that I think is worth making is that, like, I genuinely believe that humans are smart enough to create alternatives and invest in research that doesn't use animals. We've put people on the moon. Like, we just, humans are capable of so much good and so much not so good. But I just think it kind of blows my mind that we keep kind of being like, no, we have to use animals for this. Like, do we? Something to think about. I believe our priorities with regard to what we fund must shift. And that doesn't mean that our priorities are moving away from human health or, helping humans. I actually think that it would improve our ability to do that. Lastly, I think we all need to understand that when we learn to believe that some lives matter less than others, we learn to apply that logic elsewhere. So it's like, whether we're learning that, the monkeys are more important than mice, which I don't believe, we then can apply that to different humans as well. And so we got to keep that in mind, that this doesn't exist in like a vacuum, this type of like kind of teaching, so to speak. Okay, that brings me to the end, which I realize we are now totally at the end. If the link ends, join back in this one. Oh. So I'm happy to stay on and answer questions for as long as anyone wants to stay on. Sounds like there's another link being shared in case this ends. I don't know if it's like timed or whatever, but yeah.
If for some reason, I recommend now, if you guys can open up another browser and just have that link ready to go. If this abruptly ends in like a minute or two because of that hour limit mark, just want to throw that out there now.
Cool.
In the next few seconds, but yeah, finish what you're saying. So sorry.
Oh no, that's really all I got. I know I kind of rushed through some of the end, but as we talked about, Ryan, I think I ended up having way more to talk about than would fit in this presentation. So
no worries at all. I mean, that was really something. I mean, the testimonies of the individual primates and what the story was like with you and them was really something, and sort of brings into light that every animal, not just the ones tested on here at UW, tested on any other place, whether it's in the food industry, every fish, every chicken, every pig, they all have their individual stories and their own experiences. And I think when we think about it like that, it becomes ever more urgent. Yeah. Thank you. This is if you guys are available, feel free to start, raising your hand to ask questions. I know that was something a lot of you guys are looking forward to. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand and then go for it. First question from Joseph. I should see if I can.
Oh yeah, I think you have to unmute maybe. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hey, thanks for sharing your story. It was really emotionally impactful, and I was interested if you have like advice for current students who want to like make more transparent and investigate and make public like issues at their own campus with animal testing.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so I mean, I do have to just like shout out to like Allied Scholars and the fact that this program is now mobilizing students on different campuses, because especially at UW, I know that there hasn't been a super strong animal protection kind of group going on. And, that really makes a difference. There's got to be people there talking about it, because when I was there, I don't think they're really, I mean, there might have been, but it wasn't sort of loud enough that it was reaching, right? So I think that's really important, and I'm glad that that is taking place. In terms of, animal research on the campus, I think that, being one of the things is like trying to host talks and get more people to like hear stories, like this, but also, maybe kind of, it's like so complicated because it's so, what school are you at?
I'm at the Ohio State University.
Okay. Yeah, I guess there's a number of ways. I think one thing that I would say is important to keep in mind, with types of activism, because I think you can kind of do, you can do protests, or you can hand out leaflets, like put up sort of the, I know QR codes are now a huge thing, and you can actually like even build a website that, has more information and put those around. I think one of the biggest things though is sort of how you deliver information and carry yourself with regard to this issue, because there are very strong opinions on both sides. And, I know as someone who was in the lab at the time, like I would have been sort of hesitant to engage with anyone in animal activism, even as someone who was like questioning what was going on then. I knew that like it was sort of like, keep a distance. And so, keeping that in mind, that, treating each other like people, if you're having these one-on-one conversations and asking questions like, how do you feel about this? But in terms of raising awareness too, like when you can incorporate it into like projects that you'll be presenting in classes, and I would say, yeah, I don't know. I guess I want to kind of also say, like, do others have ideas? Because for me, I haven't done this on an actual campus. I have ideas of sort of like how to talk to people about this. I think op-eds, things like that, are super powerful and can reach people. But for me, when I think about it, I think it's more about like, how do we build like a safe place for others to join this conversation and not have it be so sort of like heated. So I don't know if like Faraz or anyone else has kind of thoughts on that, but
I do think there is a bit of unique an aspect to the animal testing, is in I think most people on a day-to-day basis, that aren't vegan, for example, they are contributing more directly to it, unlike with animal testing. So part of the reason why this event was so successful, why a lot of people came up to us, why the posters were so successful, all that was a lot of people have this intuition against this.
Yeah.
And there's a way we can obviously raise awareness for this and get stuff changed for climate specifically, but if we can use that as a glue to get to the other issues that use animals that people have less intuitions for, I think that would be a very interesting direction.
I think too, like really, really trying to bring in this conversation about like, we're wanting to help humans. Like, what are we not doing that is, it's just like, I feel like the suffering that's going on is so pervasive at this point. There's so many people who need access to certain things. And it's like, when you look at the research that's being done, like take this extreme anxiety case for, it's like, why there's not enough humans that have extreme anxiety that you can talk to. I'm here. There's probably more people on this call. So I think like, as much as the animal perspective is important, some people are going to like, actually, I've had this conversation with quite a few people that, I don't even know. And so I have no idea where they're going with this, but they find that like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like if we took these millions and put it here to invest in our communities, that like the change that would take place immediately, instead of like, hey, maybe we would find this cure if we sacrifice this many animals over the course of this many years, that kind of thing. Okay. Oh, cool. David, that's very awesome. I don't know if you can all see the chat. Can you all see the chat or no? Because some of you are. Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm trying to like catch up here.
Got a question in the chat and then a raised hand. I think the chat came in first.
Okay.
They said, what are the 3 big main goals that you really want us, the audience, to take away from the speech and the stories you shared with us tonight?
What were 3 big main goals you really want? Yeah, I mean, I think the 3 main goals would be to not automatically, like, especially like as animal activists, I think as general citizens, people might not feel the same, but as people who love animals and kind of automatically jump to the like, how could you do this? To try to rein that in and consider the world that we live in, and it is an imperfect world, and that people are not necessarily doing this work because they just like harming animals. I think that there are obviously cases where things are super egregious, but I think a lot of times people do believe that what they're doing is important and is going to bring about important change. And, I think we need to just like rethink how we might be able to bring about that important change. And, also who the, who's actually benefiting from the research that's being done. Because again, we have this idea of like pumping out life-saving whatever, but we do that kind of stuff. If stuff happens to come out of it, it's so expensive, people don't have access to it, or they don't have health insurance to be able to even get it. And so like, why are we doing it? Is it just about, it's a great way to make money, but it's not actually like furthering human health the way that it really should be. So I think that was kind of like a spin around, but basically understand that animal lab workers are not the enemy. We can learn from them and work together. I genuinely believe that. Understand that what's going on in these labs, it's really hard to know unless you are actually in them. It's hard to describe because I think we take like this sort of instance, like this image out, and it's like, oh, that was just one horrible thing that happened. And the reality is that when you see these animals day after day after day in this barren cage, it's like that is their entire life. A lot of people apparently don't know this, but monkeys especially, most animals do not make it out of labs. Most are killed, euthanized for the work, but monkeys especially don't. And a lot of the monkeys that I took care of, some of them were older than me in the labs. So they had spent their whole lives in this system. So, they're not all like killed just after a couple years. Some are, but some spend their entire existence in this. And so like trying to sort of get that across, that it's not just the research, it's their actual lives. I think that's important. And my last thing would be takeaway. I think you should read John Gluck's book. That's what I think. Or look up videos where he talks. Because honestly, like he has such a powerful voice, and he's just one of the most gentle and humble human beings I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. And the first time I met him, I was sobbing. I literally, it was so comforting to me to be able to talk to someone who understood what it was like to actually be in the same facility I had been in just many years, like at a different time. But I think that you can learn like a lot from him in terms of how to talk about these issues. And yeah, so anyway, that's my really long-winded answer.
We've got some questions from the queue, starting with Sarah.
Hi, Maddie. Thank you so much for sharing your story. That all sounded incredibly traumatic and heartbreaking. I'm very sorry that happened to you. I was wondering, at any point while you were working there, I know you stopped because you graduated. Did you ever consider leaving, or do you kind of get so sucked into it that doesn't even cross your mind?
Yeah, good question. Yes, I definitely, like, there were definitely moments. I would say, like, kind of the one that stands out to me the most is there was a weekend, of course, where we had, it was actually like a week where there were just like a series of rejected newborns. And so that meant more newborns to be hand feeding and eventually try to cross foster, get to a new mom. And it was, I think, Saturday that I had gotten in and found one of the newborns dead in one of the incubators. So again, this tiny infant, no idea what happened. And then the next day, I came in to check on a different infant, and that infant, I picked them up and they were having a seizure in my hands, and then they died. And it was after that I very distinctly remember going home and laying down on my bed sobbing and calling my mom and, you know, trying to make sense of what am I doing here. But ultimately, you know, the thing that was really hard, and you will hear from other people in similar roles, is that people actually really care about those animals. Like, I really cared about them, even though honey, why are you doing that right now? Like, I wanted to take care of them, even though it's like, well, what are you taking care of them for? To ultimately experience. But I was also afraid, and others will say this too, that if you leave, who's hired next? Do they care less? Like, are they as compassionate? And not to say that I didn't do things that I'm not proud of, because I did, but these were things that were going through my mind, and I'm sure others, of just like, you feel kind of trapped because you care about them, but you also don't really want to be there. So.
Well, another question from Joseph.
Yeah, so I'm interested because if you think it's a good idea to like try to engage with people who are currently doing animal testing, and if so, like how you think it's best to approach them and ask them about it, because you know, like a lot of people I talk to about it, they think that their whole career rests on it, kind of, or they also think that they're doing something very important. So it seems kind of difficult to do it without, I guess, making it abrasive or.
Yeah, no, that's a real thing. Like, it's like, I think someone mentioned this, but it's like, there's so many programs that are like, you have to do animal research for this. You know, you're not going to make it if you don't do this. You can't do this field if you don't do animal research. So that's a real like thing that people are told. And then I think kind of, what is the word? Like, I mean, they believe it, right? So I think, you know, one of the things that I think is helpful is being able to sort of direct people to people who think differently. So whether it's like, you know, oh, have you heard of the Center for Contemporary Sciences? You know, Dr. Akhtar's work, all of these groups that are like creating alternatives, if that's what they're into. You know, sometimes I think like I don't know how like productive as like coming from the animal activist view it is to have these conversations right away. But I think, you know, that doesn't mean you can't do outreach targeting them. You could be doing things where you're like flyering and putting up like something that drives people to justify, you know, to like hear from other people who have experiences like them, and they might be more open to hearing that, as opposed to like, I'm an animal activist and I want you to, you know, care about rats the same way I do, and you think your like job depends on it, right? So I think trying to sort of get people to the resources that are going to appeal to them. So kind of depends on what they're doing for research. But yeah, that's, I guess, my thought.
Thanks. Yeah.
One quick question I had was, what time of the day were you working the labs? In between classes? Was it evenings? Was it on the weekends? Did you go to labs and go directly to class? How was it?
So the schedule during the week varied. It would just be kind of set up around whatever someone's class schedule was. So I think, you could work 9 to 1, Tuesday, Thursday, or whatever. But the weekends, and during the week, student caretakers were generally speaking doing dishes, laundry, actually not a lot of animal stuff. And that is, again, why most of my memories and engagement with the animals was the weekends, because that's when the students were responsible. And the shifts on the weekends were 7 to 11 for the 2 people. And then one person would come back in the afternoon, 3 to 4 for PM checks and health. Like if animals needed medicine in the PM or shots. So, so literally it was 4 hours early in the morning, generally speaking, but that, that could change in an instant if there's a monkey that's that's been seriously injured. All of a sudden you could be there all day. Or if there's an infant that needs to be fed, they need to be fed multiple times a day. So then we're coming in even more. There were times it was really, honestly, very haunting. There have been times where I would go into the lab at 11 o'clock at night. And it's you hear, it's silent. Even the monkeys are quiet because they're all you might hear a chirp, but it's everything's dark, very kind of creepy in a way. But yeah, that's, to get these babies the food they need until they're able to hopefully go with another mom. And yes, as my mother is chiming in, it was a huge commitment. You had to stay during vacation, stay for the summers. It was a lot.
We've got a question from Laura, then we'll get to Sarah's hand. I'm thinking another 10 minutes of this probably before I'll be sensitive to your time.
Yeah, I'm all good. It's early here, so.
Laura says, were there monkeys that showed abnormal behavior due to the confinement or lack of the stimulation?
Oh, yeah. I can think off the top of my head. I remember the room. I remember one of the monkeys that was just doing backflips over and over and over again in that tiny square, just up and down, up and down. There were monkeys who were over grooming. So they would be totally bare in places. Yeah, absolutely. They were, and, just straight up, you'd walk in the room, and especially with the babies, if there were 2 of the kind of younger babies housed where they've been weaned, but are living together with other, I don't know, 1 to 2 year olds, they then huddle together and they're hugging when you walk in the room because they're not sure what's going to happen. They're, showing that they're afraid.
We'll open it up to Sarah.
I was just wondering where on campus usually these animals are kept. I'm at Chicago. I know we also have monkeys and even larger animals like pigs and sheep. I walked around, couldn't find any. Where are they?
I think that's on purpose. I know in Wisconsin, most of the people, they'd be where even is the lab? And I would tell them and they're oh, I walk past that all the time. I had no idea. It's on purpose. They don't want you to know where they are. So it's, because for the monkeys, for instance, it literally was just this rectangle building that had windows that you were kind of blacked out on the animal floor. So you really see nothing. And there's no big indicator oh, this is a primate lab, because they don't want to do that. They don't want to draw more attention to themselves. So, I can't really answer that question other than it's on purpose.
Yeah, I know when I walk to my apartment west out of campus, there's the animal science building, and I don't know if that's where the majority of testing is done or whatever, but
Yeah.
the windows are boarded up.
Yeah. And I know like here, so I'm based in Oakland now, but I believe in Berkeley, they have like a bunch of their animals are like underground somewhere. Which part, I mean, one of the floors with the monkeys at Harlow was underground, but this, I believe like a bunch of their stuff is like totally underground. So I don't know where.
Hi, I'm Isaac. I have a question. So what, if anything, what do you want students on the UW-Madison campus to do? Like, I just want to know like what to do because I hate just like doing nothing. It makes me just feel like absolute CREAP. So, yeah, that's my question.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that you're asking that question because I feel like for a few years I was like, is there anyone who can do anything? I'm too far away. I mean, I think as much as it's possible to sort of like be raising awareness, like drawing attention, continuing to Celia, flyer places, things like that to get people to get it at the forefront of people's minds. I know when I did an op-ed almost a year ago, that actually like made its rounds pretty well. And I think like trying to get these perspectives out there is helpful. I also know that the university isn't super keen on the perspective. So that can be tough. But I think like finding ways that you can host these conversations. I mean, ideally, I think that like if more professors are able to host, you know, this viewpoint or other viewpoints in their classes. Like I've done in the past, I've actually done presentations like this one for other college professors. Like they've Zoomed me in for their classes. None at UW-Madison, but at other universities. So I think, you know, the more you can get this in front of other students, because animal research, like a lot of people really don't like it, you know, like it is, and it's, as I think we've said, can you not? As we've said, like, I think it's something that feels like a less personal than who you may be eating. So it's like an easier kind of entryway to animals. And also just, yeah, it's a little bit more of a low hanging fruit if you don't include the fact that like the government super supports it. And, you know, science is like, it's got this idea that it's like, oh, it's science, so it's good. And it's like, science is great, but is this science great? So I don't know if I'm like giving a great answer. I think this is something like I'm happy to jump on future calls and brainstorm stuff with you guys. So that I can definitely do. Cause like off the top of my head, I'm like, oh my God, I mean, like this would be really great to get more going on there, but where do we start? Because I haven't been back to Madison in like a decade. So it's probably a little different than I remember.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Animal advocacy and ASAP is super happy to like literally do anything. Like just send me.
You guys have been very active. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, just send me a message if you have an idea and we'll literally do it. So
yeah, no, that's, I mean, that's awesome.
I'll talk to some of my professors too.
Yeah. Cool.
We've got 3 raised hands. I think we'll do those 3 and then we'll call it a night. Not sure which one was first, but Laura, go for it.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I was wondering, is there any instances where the intelligence of the monkeys kind of surprised you, or like there's self-personalities, you could tell they're individualistic?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And it was hard, like, because you're working, like, you're caring for 500 plus, that, like, you only have, it's hard to like kind of give each one attention, but at the same time, if you can, then yes. You know, one of the individuals that stands out to me is Norm, and I wrote about, and again, Norm actually was unique because I didn't give him that name. I think even it might have been the animal care like director named Norm or something, but people knew him as Norm. He was this like larger male. And when I was training, you know, we were told don't touch the monkeys, whatever, like they're dangerous, which they totally are. But so this was just this like weird, unique case where one of my coworkers was like, oh, look at this. And Norm, like we walk into this room and Norm puts his arm up against like the mesh of the cage. And my coworker starts doing this, like grooming him. And I mean, he has gloves on, but like grooming him through the mesh, and Norm is just like, you know, hanging out. And then my coworker puts his arm against the mesh, and then Norm starts trying to like groom his jacketed arm. And I was like, what is happening here? And later on, like I would do the same thing when I would see Norm, is I'd let him groom my arm and I'd groom his arm. But unfortunately, at some point, Norm was no longer in that room. And when I asked, I was told that he was put into an alcohol study where he was given free like range of alcohol, basically, so he could drink as much as he wanted. And I don't know what happened to him after that. So I never saw him again. So yes, they have, I mean, their personalities definitely came out. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Putting up with my scatterbrain.
Real quick, regarding the some stuff was mentioned about the Wayne trial and the Danford dogs. We have Aiden. Just make a really quick shout out to that.
Yeah, my name's Aiden, everyone. I'd like to just quickly address something else that's going on near Madison. There's actually a very large facility that breeds beagles for laboratory testing just outside of town. And there's a trial going on March 18th. It begins here in Madison regarding that. So Game for Dogs is an organization, it's a nonprofit that I'm associated with. And I would encourage all of you to go to gamefordogs.org and find out more about a lot of opportunities to get involved. We welcome everyone in whatever capacity they have to make a difference. So for those of you looking for something to do, we welcome all of you, whether you're from Madison or not.
Amazing.
I know there was one more question. There was a hand raised for a moment. So I don't know if it went back down.
Yeah, this is Christina Kajorski. I'm a professor here at UW-Madison. And first of all, Manny, thank you so much for sharing your story. These, raising awareness, changing public opinion is going to have a big impact, as we know. If other ways when we think about change, when we think about all the way back to kind of ASPCA and why that started because of cruelty to horses being eaten, right? Why did we as a human race that? Because cars were inherent, we didn't need to have carriages anymore. And you can go on. Why did we stop harpooning whales? Because we figured out better ways to make light. We didn't have to use oil for lamps and make soap. And why did we quit plucking? I can go on. I think that raising public awareness, changing these policies in the government, all the types of things we've talked about are going to be really, really important. I also agree with what a bunch of people have said about, changing the old guard, old professors that have been doing this for 30 years. We're probably not going to get to them, but pushing on alternatives so that scientists who are around learn about the alternatives and actually think that they can do better science. I don't need to ride in this horse and carriage because now I have a car. Nobody's going to ride in a horse and carriage anymore. I mean, even if it's not because the public or the investigator suddenly realizes, wow, this is horrible. but they suddenly realize I can do better science doing something else, then all of a sudden this is going to end. So I think pushing on alternatives, getting the word out about, better alternatives, and also gathering stories, documenting, which is what I've been doing recently is as part of a course that I taught, and I'll be teaching again on alternatives, information about studies that are flawed and specifically how they're flawed and what studies could be done that could address the same questions without animals. You've said a bunch. Why aren't we studying anxiety? I have 100 friends I could name tomorrow where you could do a study on my friends. They'd all sign up, and it would be more impactful because it's straight in humans. So thinking about alternatives that way, not just from organ on a chip or whatever the kind of technologies that are available, but also how could we just design human studies that would replace these. So at any rate, I screwed up and hit that button, but I'm glad you took a few minutes to listen to what I had to say anyway. And thank you for coming. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you were able to make it. And I'm glad that there are a few professors at UW who are kind of on board with this, because at least when I was there, I don't think I knew of any. So
thank you so much, everyone. Big thanks to you, obviously, Madeline. And yeah, it's really great to have events like this. You guys stayed on for almost 2 hours, which is really cool. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And what's the best way to stay in contact with you, Madeline?
Yeah, so I think I had put my email, but honestly, Instagram is really where I'm most active. It's at Madeline_Krasno, but you can find me under that name basically anywhere. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.